I'm June LaCombe. I oversee exhibitions of sculpture. I put together temporary shows in public places where people can view sculpture on the landscape and then offer it for sale for those people who would like to purchase it. I have a show currently at my home. This is a piece by Lise that she did at a public art symposium. But I have a whole show at my home right now that's called Embracing Earth. And this is, I have a series of workshops on the art of sustainable living, as well as living with art that sustains us. So I have a whole series of speakers that are doing programs in the afternoon related to those themes of Sunday afternoons where I have open houses. This is 125 pieces of sculpture out on my landscape, including George Sherwood, who's a kinetic artist. And this piece gracefully turns in the wind. I've been doing shows at the Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens for the last 10 years, and I've been doing shows at the Maine Audubon Society for the last 25 years. This is called The Memory of Fibonacci by George Sherwood, and it just glistens and sparkles in the light. And I have work at my farm in this particular show by Wendy Klemperer. When I do shows inside, I'm looking at the numinous qualities of matter and how sculpture brings materials into our lives. This is a little show that I put together at the Blum Gallery at the College of the Atlantic in 2005, but I've had a number of shows there. My other show right now is called Power of Place, and it's at Wells Reserve. I work with about 50 artists from New England, this show has 65 pieces of sculpture on the landscape of Wells Reserve. The opening reception is this Wednesday, next Wednesday at 4:30. My receptions are fun, you're all invited to come. It has the kinetic work of Joyce Audi Zarins, these giant maple seed pods. And it has some grand granite sculpture in this very beautiful farm landscape. As I was working, though, with these public art shows and offering work for sale, about now 20 years ago, I decided to go back and really look at the environmental arts movement. And my background was partially in environmental education, and so I was looking at insights for environmental art, insights from environmental art for environmental education. Both environmental education and the word environmental art has morphed over the years to include much more than the original land arts movement where it started. But this is sustainable art is now really including social justice, nonviolence, economics. But I was postulating that artists are helping us raise environmental awareness. They're focusing our attention on environmental issues. They're exploring our relationship with Earth's materials, re-enchanting the land. They're helping reveal the awe and mystery of the universe, and they're celebrating beauty. Some artists are providing a framework for participatory environmental action projects. Many of these artists were inspired by ancient artworks, this serpent spiral in Ohio. But the first environmental artists were called land artists, and they went far from the cities in the 60s, and there was a reaction against the kind of commodity-driven urban arts scene, and they went to the wide open spaces of the West and did massive pieces on the land. This is the work of Michael Heiser. He was working with the earth as medium. He pronounced the art scene dead in New York City, went west. Michael Heiser also did strip mine reclamation projects that he called reformation projects, where he was inspired by these ancient art forms, and he placed these on the landscape as a way of helping restore strip mines. But these first artists were highly criticized by people like Lucy Lepard, that said that these artists took their strength from distance from places, distance from people, distance from issues. And the next artists reintroduced work to cityscapes. This is a piece by Alan Sonfest, and what he did was he did an interpretation of the forgotten natural history of a section of land in New York City where he planted indigenous plant materials, and he did an exclosure separating the city from these plant materials that became a living monument to our natural heritage. This is another site-specific piece that he did called Circles of Time, and it was in Florence, Italy, where he looked at the different land use and the different plant materials over time, and he did concentric rings of plantings. This is such a whirlwind of this big subject, I really apologize, but I'm trying to touch on some of the artists that were instrumental in making changing the course of our history. This is Marilu Cleese, and she pronounced that, she said, she questioned the art in general and said, why can't we be maintaining our cities why can't maintenance itself be considered art? And her first pieces were performance art pieces where she was on the steps of the museum, but she was washing the steps. People were walking into the museum to see the show, and she was the show. And she became the artist in residence for New York City, where she turned her focus towards the solid waste crisis, and she actually helped New York redesign the waste disposal system in New York, and she did a permanent interpretive center looking at solid waste issues. And at one point, she shook the hands of the garbage workers and thanked them for taking our garbage away, and she did this stainless steel coated mirror garbage truck, and in order to reflect the people who were actually creating the waste and reflecting themselves back in that she called social mirror. I do need to mention before I go on to Agnes Deniz that Marilu Cleese has a piece downstairs in the lobby. Do you know that? It's just been restored, but it's a piece that's a part of the Public Percent for Arts program when this building was being redone. And she was fascinated by they were quartz crystal arrowheads, and she did this installation of those arrowheads, focusing over the layers of history of Portland. She influenced many artists in doing action projects. This is Agnes Deniz, who went to Battery Park, and she planted 2 acres of wheat. And she maintained that wheat for 4 months and then harvested the wheat. And some of that wheat was fed to the horses that live in New York City, and others was planted she planted wheat in 28 different cities of the world. And it became kind of the symbol of commerce, world trade, economics, right in downtown New York City, and it's inspired many other projects. In another project, she planned this collaborative environmental project where she did Tree Mountain, and this was adopted by Finland in Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, and they actually planted 11,000 people planted 11,000 trees in a strip mine reclamation project. And those artists have absolutely inspired many other artists, and this is a more recent project, bad pixelation, called Seeding the City. It's a grassroots project that incorporates social network to find methods of greening the city. And they've done these this is in New York City. Many people have worked on garden modules. Lynn Howell called herself a trans-species artist. She wanted to remediate landscapes and provide wildlife with drinking holes in desert landscapes, and she's done raptor roosts providing habitat. I wanted to mention this as another land artist. When Heiser and Smithson were doing those heavy-handed projects out west, James Pierce was coming to a farm in Clinton, Maine. And James did a garden of history. He had his PhD from Harvard, and he was he was the director of art at the University of Kentucky. But he came to Clinton, Maine, and he made these giant earthworks, but it was personalizing his place. It was doing projects. He was a true academic, but he came out here and made these giant pieces on the land in Clinton, Maine. He did Earth Woman. This is written up in James Beardsley and Kastner and Wallace. It's in all environmental art history texts, but people in Maine don't really know about it. And he did his very famous Earth Woman when the sun rises between her buttocks on the solstice. But he went on to work in, he did a school project, which I always loved this project. He did a giant octopus with a school community in Kentucky where loads of earth were donated, and then the children did the final patting the pieces into form. And it became their playground and they had reading groups there, so that the earth, they were sitting and reading in the tentacles of this giant earth sculpture. But James Pierce also, for years, he was a part of my sculpture shows, and he did this mica and pebble bowerbird installation at one of my shows at the College of the Atlantic. So I'm going to just say very briefly, because Andy Goldsworthy is known by so many as an ephemeral artist, and he's done projects throughout the world. He was going and participating with these places and celebrating an extraordinary beauty that surrounds us. And I just believe that beauty cannot be underestimated in art. All of his pieces were not transitory or ephemeral. He did this piece that I saw years ago at Grisdale Forest in England, and he recreated the wall that went for a walk at Storm King. But images, introduce themes. I mean, I think that his work continues to be very powerful. Another environmental artist that does ephemeral work is Chris Drury, and he collected pieces from his daily walk and wove them into this yearly medicine wheel. He was influenced by artists, Hamish Fulton and others that are walking artists, Richard Long, where he said, I walk on the land to be woven into nature, vertical trees and horizontal hills. But he also creates these huge pieces. This is Vortex. And here he's written the history of this place within the pattern of a mushroom spore print. But Chris Drury went on to do environmental art restoration projects, where this is a heart of reeds, where water was being filtered through these particular plant materials, and it was cleansing the water. So he became an environmental activist with his pieces. I have so many more things I'd like to say, but I'm not going to say it. Okay, and I'm going to finish with Maya Lin, who is recognized for her memorials, but she was also an architect, and her sculpture, this was her original proposal as a student for the Vietnam Memorial that she did as a project, as a student. But this is definitely an earth art project. She used the deep cut in the earth, and she used black granite to site her monument. And in the Civil Rights Memorial, she uses the cleansing metaphor of water. And she refers to the woman's table as a water table, connecting it to the reservoir. Wave Field is a classic earthwork that she created at the Aerospace Engineering Building. We had a piece here in Portland that was probably inspired by some of this work. But she described in her book Boundaries, her final memorial, she said, which focused on the extinction of species, the last memorial. She imagined a series of markers that would monitor the health of the planet, from climate indicators and pollution levels to the loss of habitat. And she, in fact, has done this, and she has a great website and an interactive site it's called What's Missing. She says, maybe I'm just asking you to pay closer attention to the land. Artists are helping focus our attention. Oh, sorry, back. They're using art as a catalyst for environmental consciousness and activism. They're providing earth-sensitive imagery, and this art is addressing the scientific and the spiritual, the cultural and the natural, and the personal and the political. An integration of these themes, it seems, is essential as we seek to imagine a more sustainable future. The primer in 20 minutes. Thank you. It's Wednesday, and I put a series of cards out, and they're out on the table.
Okay.
And it's at LaCombe. It's Wells Reserve at LaCombe, so it's in Wells.
Okay.
And it's 4:30 to 6:30, and it's a big outdoor sculpture show.
Thank you.
When you have shows at your house, what's the accessibility like? Are there open hours? Is it invite only? How does that
No,
work?
they're open by appointment, and then every Sunday afternoon from 1 to 4 throughout the show. And if you go on my website, you can see all of the different talks that are being given. I have Miles Chapin doing a talk, who's a granite sculptor. He did the public arts piece that's at the Brunswick Transportation Center, great big granite piece, but he's speaking this Sunday afternoon. And then I have people from Revision Energy talking about going solar. I have Qigong instructors coming in. It was really about sustainable living and celebrating sustainability. But they're all listed on my website. And my website is June LaCombe Sculpture. And if you can't spell LaCombe, jlsculpture.com will get you there.
Thank
Yes.
you. I was just going to say that June Pierce has a piece at USM as well in Gorham.
That's right.